I still remember the summer of 2015 like it was yesterday, though I wish I could forget it. That year, my younger cousin Lily and her uncle Mark vanished in the Cascades, leaving behind nothing but confusion, whispers, and a lingering ache that stretched across families and towns. The Cascades were the kind of place people went when they wanted to find peace, or when they wanted to disappear entirely. Towering ridges, hidden lakes, valleys swallowed by fog, and forests so thick they seemed stitched together by shadows. To outsiders, the range was a postcard of rugged beauty, but to those of us who lived within driving distance, it carried an undertone of menace. Stories of hikers never returning, climbers found months later by hunters, and families left with nothing but questions. Lily and Mark became part of that endless ledger of the lost. And though years passed, the story of their disappearance never settled into the dust of time the way most tragedies do. Because 5 years later, something surfaced. Something that rewrote what we thought we knew. But to understand that, you need to know who they were, and what kind of bond tethered them together, and how the Cascades can swallow even the brightest laughter into silence. Lily was just 13 when she vanished, a quiet yet fiercely curious girl with the kind of wide-eyed wonder you only find in people untouched by cynicism. She wasn't one of those teenagers obsessed with phones or trends, at least not entirely. Instead, she had an interest in the natural world. She'd crouch down on trails to examine beetles or trace the rings of fallen logs with her fingertips like they were ancient codes waiting to be cracked. She was small for her age, with a tangle of auburn hair she never quite managed to tame and a smile that flickered quickly, as if the world offered her far too much to take in at once. She trusted people too easily. Maybe that's what made her Uncle Mark her favorite person. Mark was 42 then, rugged in his own careless way, with a laugh that could rise above rushing rivers and a patience that could make anyone feel safe. He wasn't her father. Lily's dad had been absent most of her life, a ghost of sorts, but Mark stepped into that gap naturally. He taught her how to tie knots, how to whittle sticks into arrows, how to spot constellations when the night sky bloomed over the Cascades. To her, he wasn't just an uncle. He was a guide, a mentor, a hero. That August, they planned a 3-day camping trip near Cathedral Rock, one of those jagged spires that clawed at the sky and tested the nerve of climbers. I wasn't there, though sometimes I wonder how different things would have been if I had gone along. I was 18 at the time, older than Lily by 5 years, busy with the restless ambitions of someone just stepping into adulthood. My summers were filled with work, late nights, and the occasional trail run, but camping with family? That seemed like something I'd outgrown. When Mark asked if I wanted to come along, I laughed it off, promising, maybe next time. The guilt of those 2 words would follow me for years. Because next time never came. The first day of their trip was ordinary, according to the few photographs Lily had texted to her mother before service faded. A shot of her holding a fishing pole at a lake fringed with evergreens. A blurry picture of Mark pretending to wrestle a fallen branch, like it was a bear. Then silence. 3 days passed. 4. On the 5th, Lily's mom, panic brimming her voice, called the ranger station. By then, the search began. At first, it was volunteers combing through the obvious trails, shouting their names into the undergrowth. Then it was professional teams, helicopters hovering low enough to stir the treetops. Dogs sniffed through brush, finding nothing but deer scat and cold streams. Their camp was discovered on the 2nd day of the search. The tent was zipped up neatly, sleeping bags inside, as if waiting for their return. A skillet, blackened from fire, rested on a log. Lily's backpack sat beside it, half-packed with snacks and a water bottle. No signs of struggle, no tracks leading away, nothing. Just absence. I watched all this unfold from the sidelines, too young to truly help, too old to hide from the heaviness in the air. The Cascades became a map of grief. Reporters swarmed the small town where Lily lived, microphones pushing at tearful faces. Locals traded rumors in hushed tones. Maybe they'd been attacked by a bear. Maybe they'd fallen into one of the glacier-fed rivers. Maybe Mark had snapped and done something unthinkable. Theories stacked on top of theories until the truth was smothered. Days bled into weeks, weeks into months. Winter closed the passes, snow sealing away any remaining traces. When spring came, hope did too briefly, until that too dissolved. By the 1-year mark, their names were carved into plaques, their faces pinned to bulletin boards that faded under the sun. People moved on. That's what towns do. But I didn't. Neither did Lily's mother, nor Mark's brother, nor the few of us who knew them beyond the headlines. We carried the unanswered question like a splinter lodged too deep to pull free. How could two people vanish so cleanly, so completely, without leaving behind even a whisper of explanation? The 2nd year came and went, then the 3rd. Life pulled me forward. I graduated, worked, traveled, but every August, I found myself drawn back to the Cascades, as if the mountains demanded a kind of pilgrimage. I'd walk trails near Cathedral Rock, scanning the mossy earth, the shadows between pines, searching for something I couldn't name. I'd imagine Lily stepping just ahead of me, her laughter bouncing against the trees, Mark pausing to adjust his pack. But the forest never gave me anything in return. Just silence, just wind. By the 4th year, my visits became quieter, more internal, almost ritualistic. I no longer expected to find them. Instead, I carried their memory like a lantern, fragile but still glowing. And then came the 5th year, the year everything changed. It began with a video. A base jumper named Kyle had strapped a GoPro to his helmet as he launched from a cliff near Cathedral Rock. He posted the footage online weeks later, just another adrenaline-fueled clip in the endless scroll of extreme sports content. But what he captured halfway through his descent stopped me cold. At first, it was just a blur in the shadows below the treeline, the kind of thing you might miss if you blinked. But frame by frame, the image sharpened. A figure, still, upright, watching. And next to it, something smaller. My heart stopped when I saw the outline of Lily's auburn hair catching a fragment of light. Through a canyon. But when someone paused the footage at the 23-second mark and circled what looked like two figures, it took on a life of its own. I stumbled across it late one night, scrolling aimlessly, not looking for anything, not expecting anything. And then there it was, Kyle's shaky footage, the jagged edge of Cathedral Rock rushing past, the forest unfolding below like a green ocean. And then those two shapes. Frozen. Unmoving. Out of place in the wilderness. My blood turned cold, my pulse hammering in my ears. I replayed it dozens of times, slowing it down, zooming in until the pixels broke apart. The taller figure seemed broad-shouldered, familiar in a way that made my chest ache. The smaller shape had hair that seemed to flare red gold when the sunlight caught it, though it was grainy, fractured light. But I knew before I even admitted it to myself. It was them. It was Lily. It was Mark. Or it was something that carried their shadows. I told myself I was being irrational, that I was seeing what I wanted to see. That's what grief does. It sharpens shadows into faces, molds coincidences into signs. But the longer I watched, the less it felt like coincidence. These weren't random smudges in a forest. They were standing in a clearing no trail reached, looking upward, almost as if they were aware of being seen. Kyle's camera jerked as he pulled a chute, and the figures vanished into the blur of trees. My hands shook when I closed my laptop, my reflection in the darkened screen pale and frightened. That night I dreamed of Lily calling my name from the woods, her voice thin and echoing, as if carried by the wind. I woke before dawn, drenched in sweat, and I knew I couldn't ignore it. Whether the video was real or a trick of the light, I had to find out. I started with Kyle. Tracking him down wasn't hard. He had an Instagram filled with cliff dives, wingsuits, beer with friends in faraway cities. When I messaged him, explaining who I was and what I'd seen, he replied within hours. "Man, you're like the 10th person to bring that up," he wrote. "But I swear, I didn't see anyone down there. Just trees." Didn't even know that footage had anything weird until people started DMing me about it. I asked him for the raw file, uncompressed, and to my surprise, he sent it. "Go nuts," he said. "But honestly, it's just pareidolia. Your brain wants to see people, so it does." I didn't argue, though I disagreed. Watching the raw footage on a larger screen only cemented what I felt in my bones. Lily and Mark were there, if only for a split second, caught between shadows and light. When I showed the video to Lily's mom, her hands flew to her mouth. She sobbed, shaking her head, whispering, "That's her. Oh my God, that's her." But when she brought it to the sheriff's office, they brushed it off. "Grainy footage doesn't prove anything," one deputy said, his voice flat, rehearsed. "Could be rocks, could be trees. And even if it is people, it doesn't mean they're Lily and Mark." The case had long been cold, buried under budget constraints and fresher tragedies. No one wanted to reopen it on the basis of a viral video. But I couldn't let it go. The image haunted me. It gnawed at me like hunger. I had to go back. So I packed a bag. Nothing elaborate, just the essentials. Tent, sleeping bag, stove, food, map, compass. I'd hiked the Cascades enough to know what I was walking into. But this time was different. This time I wasn't just hiking, I was searching for ghosts. The drive up felt endless, the roads winding like serpents through the hills, each mile dragging me closer to a place I wasn't sure I wanted to be. When I finally reached the trailhead, late afternoon light slanting through the pines, I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the trees. They looked the same as they had years ago, tall, silent, unyielding, but to me, they were different now. They weren't just forest. They were the last witnesses to Lily and Mark. They were the keepers of whatever truth had been hidden. The first day on the trail was uneventful, though my nerves buzzed like static. Every sound seemed amplified. The crack of a twig, the rush of wind through needles, the distant caw of a raven. I camped by a stream that night, the water cold and clear, my tent a thin barrier between me and the wilderness. Sleep came in fragments, broken by dreams of Lily standing at the edge of the clearing, watching me. In the morning, I pressed onward, following not just the map, but the path carved in my memory. I remember the spot where searchers had once gathered, the area where the camp had been found. When I reached it, my chest tightened. The clearing was overgrown now, nature reclaiming what had been abandoned. The fire pit was nothing but stones half buried in moss. The log where the skillet had sat was rotted, collapsed. But standing there, I could almost hear their laughter echoing through time. From there, I pushed deeper. The video had been filmed from a cliff near Cathedral Rock, and I traced the line of sight as best I could. It wasn't exact, the footage was shaky, the distance hard to gauge, but I found a ridge that seemed close enough. From there, I scanned the valley below, my eyes tracing the breaks in the treetops, searching for a clearing that matched. Hours passed. The sun slid westward, shadows lengthening. And then I saw it, a hollow in the forest floor, a patch where the trees bent away, forming a small circle of exposed earth. My breath caught. That had to be it. That had to be where the figure stood. Getting down wasn't easy. The slope was steep, the underbrush thick. Branches clawed at my jacket, rocks shifted under my boots. But adrenaline carried me. By the time I reached the hollow, the light was fading, streaks of orange cutting through the canopy. The clearing was smaller than I'd imagined, barely large enough for two people to stand side by side. The earth was uneven, littered with stones and old branches. At first, it looked ordinary, but the longer I stood there, the stranger it felt. The silence was heavier, the air colder, as if the place was holding its breath. I knelt, brushing away leaves, searching for any sign, footprints, scraps of fabric, anything. And that's when I saw it. Half buried in the soil was a piece of fabric, frayed and dirty, but unmistakable. Blue with a faded floral pattern. My heart lurched. I'd seen that pattern before, on Lily's favorite hoodie, the one she wore in nearly every photo from that summer. I pulled it free, hands trembling. The fabric was stiff, weather-worn, but real. Tangible. Proof. Not just shadows in a video, not just tricks of the light. They had been here. She had been here. I stayed in the clearing until dark, staring at the scrap of fabric in my hands, unable to move. 1,000 questions clawed at me. Why had she been here? Why hadn't anyone found this before? Where was the rest of her? The forest pressed close, whispering with unseen movements, and I knew I couldn't stay the night there. I set up camp a short distance away, but sleep didn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lily standing in the clearing, the fabric still clutched to her chest, her eyes pleading with me to keep going. And I knew I would. I couldn't stop now. The morning light crept over the Cascades like liquid fire, dripping gold through the canopy as if the forest itself was waking reluctantly. I rose stiff and bleary-eyed, the scrap of Lily's hoodie folded carefully in my pack, as though it were some sacred relic. My hands still smelled of earth from the night before. The discovery had left me shaken, but also electrified. It wasn't just hope anymore. It was evidence, a tether to something beyond silence. And yet, standing in that hollow clearing again with fresh daylight piercing through, I felt more unsettled than ever. Because if Lily and Mark had been here, why had no one found this before? Search teams had scoured these woods with dogs, drones, and boots on the ground. How could they have missed this place? Unless something or someone had kept it hidden. That thought gnawed at me as I packed up and set out, the mountains looming above like watchers with secrets of their own. The Cascades aren't just wilderness. They're alive in a way that unsettles you the longer you stay. Trails vanish into undergrowth overnight. Fog crawls in without warning, swallowing everything in sight. Creeks shift their courses, leaving old beds dry and new ones running where no water should be. It's beautiful, yes, but it's also merciless. And in those first miles after the clearing, I couldn't shake the sense that I was being guided or herded somewhere. A subtle pull, as if unseen eyes were on me. I tried to dismiss it as paranoia, but every snapped twig, every shadow stretching in the corner of my vision, tightened the knot in my stomach. The forest had taken Lily and Mark. Now it felt like it had turned its gaze on me. I pressed deeper toward the base of Cathedral Rock, retracing the line from Kyle's video again and again in my mind. The air grew colder the higher I climbed, the pines thinning until jagged stone pierced upward like teeth. From one ledge, I paused to look down over the valley, my breath misting. The clearing where I'd found the fabric was visible far below, a tiny scar in a sea of green. And then movement. A flicker at the edge of the clearing. I lifted my binoculars, heart hammering. For an instant, I swore I saw someone standing there.
Tall.
Broad-shouldered.
Still. My throat went dry. Mark.
It had to be Mark. I blinked, adjusted focus, scanned again, but the figure was gone. Only trees remained, swaying softly in the wind. I lowered the binoculars slowly, my hands shaking. Was it my mind playing tricks, or was there truly someone else out here? By late afternoon, clouds rolled in, the sky bruised and heavy. Rain began in hesitant drops before breaking open in sheets. I scrambled to find shelter, ducking beneath an overhang of stone. The storm raged for hours, thunder booming so close it rattled my bones. In the echoes of that thunder, I thought I heard voices, faint, fleeting. A girl's laughter, carried like a thread through the roar. I pressed deeper into the stone alcove, covering my ears, but the sound lingered in my head. Lily's voice. I would have sworn it. When the rain finally eased, I stepped out into a forest washed clean and gleaming. Everything smelled sharp and alive. But beneath it all, there was a weight in the air, a pressure that left me dizzy. Something was building. Something was waiting. That night, I made camp near a stream, the water rushing over rocks with a sound almost too steady, too purposeful, like a chant. I sat by the fire, staring at the scrap of fabric again, tracing the faded flowers with my thumb. I tried to imagine Lily wearing it, her hair wild, her cheeks flushed from climbing trails. She'd tug the sleeves over her hands when she was cold. She'd laugh when Mark teased her about dressing like it was still spring in the middle of August. The memory hurt so much it felt physical, like a blade sliding under my ribs. But it also drove me on, because I couldn't shake the sense that she was still out there.
Not gone.
Not buried.
Still out there.
Sleep was worse that night. I drifted in and out of nightmares, each one more vivid than the last. In one, I was standing in the clearing again. Only this time Lily was there, reaching toward me. Her eyes were wide, her lips moving, but no sound came out. Behind her, Mark stood with his hand on her shoulder, his expression unreadable. When I stepped closer, the ground gave way, and I plummeted into darkness. I woke gasping, my body tangled in the sleeping bag, the fire long dead. And there, in the silence, I heard it. Footsteps.
Slow.
Deliberate. Crunching over leaves just outside my tent. My blood turned to ice. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. The steps circled, pausing, then continuing. For minutes, hours maybe, they lingered. When at last they faded, swallowed by the forest, I lay trembling, certain I hadn't been alone. At dawn, exhaustion weighed me down, but fear pushed me forward. I followed the stream uphill, the terrain steeper, more hostile. Somewhere above, a waterfall roared faintly. The path wasn't a path at all, just a thread of instinct pulling me along. And then, halfway up the slope, I found something else. A carving on a tree, deep and deliberate. L+M inside a crude heart. The bark around it was weathered, scarred by time, but the lines were unmistakable. My knees buckled. I pressed my hand against it, as if by touching it I could touch them. The forest around me was silent, reverent. They had been here. They had marked this place. Not just vanished into thin air, not erased. They had left traces like breadcrumbs, waiting for someone to follow. But the carving raised more questions than it answered. Why carve that? Why here? Was it a sign of love, of comfort, or of desperation? I couldn't decide. All I knew was that I had to keep climbing. The waterfall thundered louder with each step until at last I reached it, a veil of white crashing into a pool so clear it reflected the cliffs like glass. The mist chilled my skin, but there was something mesmerizing about it, something that felt almost sacred. And there, at the edge of the pool, half hidden beneath stones, I saw another fragment, a rusted metal canteen. I pulled it free, my breath catching when I saw the initials scratched into its side. M.H. Marks. Without question. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't chance. They had been here. The Cascades still held them, piece by piece. I sat by the waterfall until the light began to fade, the roar filling my ears, my mind racing with possibilities. If Mark's canteen was here, where had he gone after? And why leave it behind? The Cascades don't give up their secrets easily, but for the first time in years, I felt close, terrifyingly close, to the truth. The waterfall never stopped echoing in my head, even after I left it behind. That ceaseless roar became a pulse, a rhythm that pushed me forward into places the maps never showed. The deeper I went, the more the Cascades seemed to shift around me. Trails bent where they shouldn't. Landmarks I thought I recognized looked altered, distorted, as though the mountain itself was trying to lead me astray. More than once I doubled back only to realize I'd walked in a wide circle. Hunger gnawed at me, fatigue pulled at my bones, but none of it mattered. I had Mark's canteen. I had Lily's scrap of fabric. They weren't figments, weren't tricks of light or tricks of grief. They were real. That truth burned inside me like a second heartbeat. And it terrified me. Because if they'd been here, if they'd stood in this forest, carved their initials into bark, dropped possessions like breadcrumbs, then something had happened to keep them from leaving. Something far worse than getting lost. By the third day of my search, the forest no longer felt like wilderness. It felt like architecture. Every fallen log, every rise and hollow, every tangled snarl of roots seemed placed with intent. I began to notice patterns I couldn't explain, stones stacked in threes, branches bent into arches, circles of earth bare of vegetation. At first I thought these were remnants of old campers or survivalists. But the deeper I looked, the stranger they seemed. These weren't human campsites. They were markers, symbols, the kind of things that prick the back of your neck because you know they mean something, even if you don't yet understand what. That night, I camped beneath a cedar older than any I'd ever seen, Its trunk split into 3 massive spires that reached for the sky like fingers. I built a small fire, careful not to attract too much attention, but as the flames licked upward, I realized I was already being watched. 2 pale eyes reflected just beyond the firelight. My heart stuttered. A cougar, maybe, or a wolf. I froze, not daring to move. The eyes blinked once, then disappeared into the dark. But the feeling of being observed lingered long after, burrowing into me until I barely slept. Every crack of twig, every sigh of wind became footsteps circling my tent. I told myself it was paranoia, but in the marrow of my bones, I knew the Cascades were no longer indifferent. They were aware of me. The next morning, fog lay heavy, smothering the world to a few feet in every direction. I pressed on, compass in hand, though it was like walking through a dream where the ground itself might dissolve beneath your feet. Then, out of the haze, I found something that stopped me cold. Another clearing. Larger this time, perfectly round, as though the forest had pulled back intentionally. In the center stood a structure. At first I thought it was a natural formation, rocks piled into a crude tower. But as I drew closer, my stomach dropped. It wasn't natural. It was man-made. A cairn nearly 6 feet tall, built from stones hauled here by human hands. Some were etched with marks, lines, crosses, spirals. And wedged into the cairn, tucked between 2 slabs, was something that made my throat close. A photograph. The edges were warped from moisture, but the image was unmistakable. Lily, sitting by a lake, grinning as she held a fishing pole. The same photo she'd texted to her mother the first day of their trip. But this print was larger, physical, not a digital copy. My hands shook as I pulled it free. How had it gotten here? Who had placed it in the cairn?
And why?
My gut screamed that this was no accident. This was deliberate. Someone or something wanted me to find it. I wanted to run then. To grab my pack, turn back, and put miles between myself and that cairn. But something rooted me there. A terrible fascination, the same pull that draws moths into flames. Because as much as fear coiled in my chest, hope burned hotter. If Lily's photo was here, then maybe, just maybe, they still were too. I tucked the photograph carefully into my jacket, forcing myself to breathe, forcing myself to move. The forest swallowed me again, the cairn vanishing behind fog like it had never existed. By afternoon, the fog lifted, revealing jagged peaks ahead, their tops crowned with snow. I knew I couldn't climb higher without risking a fall. So I skirted the base, weaving through gullies and rock slides, until I found myself at the mouth of a cave. The entrance yawned black and wide, rimmed with icicles that dripped steadily into pools below. My first instinct was to avoid it. Nothing good waits in caves. But then I saw it, scratched into the stone beside the entrance, faint but legible. Help US. 2 words, carved deep, the letters uneven as if done in haste. My throat tightened. It was them. It had to be them. I stepped inside. The cave swallowed me in silence. My headlamp cut through the dark, illuminating walls slick with mineral sheen. I followed the passage deeper, every step echoing. And then I found it, another clue, small but undeniable. A shoelace, frayed and torn, lying in the dirt. I knelt, my hands trembling as I picked it up. It was small, too small for Mark. It was Lily's. The shoelace was old, brittle, but it hadn't been here forever. My pulse raced. I was close. So close. But the cave went on, deeper than I dared. After an hour of winding corridors, the air grew thin, my head dizzy. My instincts screamed at me to turn back, and for once I listened. I marked the wall with chalk and promised myself I'd return. As I stepped back into the daylight, though, I couldn't shake the sensation that something had followed me. The forest no longer felt empty. It felt inhabited. And not just by deer or bears. By something else. Something that had been here all along, watching, waiting. That night, the dreams grew worse. I saw Lily again, reaching out, but this time her face was streaked with dirt, her eyes hollow. "He won't let us leave," she whispered, though her lips never moved. I woke choking, the echo of those words still in my ears. I sat up, scanning the dark woods, and froze. Just beyond the glow of my dying fire, a figure stood, broad-shouldered, motionless. My chest seized. "Mark," I whispered. The figure didn't move. I blinked, and it was gone. Only trees remained. I lay back, heart pounding, knowing with a terrible certainty that the Cascades hadn't given up Lily and Mark. They had been claimed, and now, piece by piece, I was being pulled into that same fate.